Hello cosplay world and YouTube world alike, this is Jack Sentinel coming to you live from I Am Cosplay and so can you, making a kick-ass katana, wielded by our dear girl Hit Girl from our dear series Hit Girl Kickass and Kickass 2. Alright, starting off, MDF board, make the negative, all that fun stuff. You want to actually have this for any weapon that you make. It makes life simpler. Alright, once you draw this sucker out, it's nothing, it's all cakewalk from here. Alright, take your handsaw, jigsaw, whatever you do, carve it out and actually use your fine-tooth rasp or sanding sponge to carve it out. Now, you're going to actually want to make your edge doing this at the same time. Personally, I suggest using the rasp instead of sanding sponge for this part because it's a lot faster. You get a better texture and a lot better result when you do it this way. Alright, once you actually have an even edge, and once it's all balanced out and all the bumps from the prior cuts are done, because you're going to make mistakes if you make this just the first time, no matter what. You want to actually get the edge. Edging is wherever you want it to be in this case. Next, sanding. It's a lot easier than it looks. Actually, it's a lot easier than it sounds. But you're going to be using a 4-step down technique. What this technique is, and I'm pretty sure that's not what it's called, don't quote me on that, is you're taking the highest sanding sponge or sanding tool in your arsenal, sanding the crap out of the thing, and then dropping down to the next one once you've completed your circlets around the thing. In this case, I went with, I don't even know what the sanding grid on these things are anymore. I just go by color. I think it's blue, red, green, yellow. But anyway, once you get past the first one, you go down, you sand the exact same spot over until you get to the smaller one, and you're going to get a very, very, very smooth texture out of this by the end. I mean, it was almost a shame to paint it. That's how much I love this, how it felt in my hands. Alright. Once you're done with this, pretty much the blade's done. All you have to do now is go to the handles. In this case, I use PVC. Cut a chunk from Menards or Home Depot or wherever you got it from your basement in half, or whatever size you want it to be, and sand it down with your sanding rasp. Why can't I say that word? Anyway, sanding it down with this thing, it's a lot easier if you get a bigger one. They're really cheap, and getting the bigger ones is usually a lot better for you, or getting the packs. But once you get where you want it done and sand it in, it's a lot easier to actually fit the blade inside. Alright, so as you see, blade fits perfectly fine. Everything's hunky-dory, but we wanted to go in deeper. We wanted to sit inside of the PVC. So what we're going to have to do is cut the PVC so that the blade sits inside of it. Now in this case, we're actually going to be using a heat knife. Other people would suggest using a handsaw like you did with the blade. I personally say if you have a fine-tooth handsaw, look for it. It's the same thing. You actually might be able to work faster with a handsaw than you would with a heat knife. I personally use the heat knife to demonstrate how it works. Now, heat knives have two primary purposes: wood burning and torture. I mean, cutting. Cutting is what I say. Anyway. A little bit of safety precautions. Don't touch the metal parts when it's on because it will electrocute you no matter what you do, and or burn you. If you think you got cut by this thing, it will cauterize the metal. So you're fine, kinda. Alright. Cutting these things is also a very slow process, so don't try and force it, or you will break the heat knife or the blade and tail, or you'll just gum up the blade with whatever melted crap that you just cut through. A lot of people make this mistake and it ruins so many heat knives, especially the fact that they're hard to find. Well, around me they're hard to find. I'm pretty sure you can find them online. I like going to stores, so it's a little bit different for me. Anyway, once you have it cut, you're pretty much guaranteed a seat, proper seating. But in case you messed up the cut, sometimes it's better to just take the same sanding rasp that you used before and just take it in between the two and just grind it through there just to make sure that it's a little bit flush. If it's bent, or you somehow messed up and bent the edges, take the sanding rasp anyway. You're going to be gluing this thing down, that way it doesn't go anywhere. So it's not going to hurt to, get some extra precautions. Alright, so this thing is supposed to connect, so let's actually get this thing into a connecting position. Alright. What we're going to do is take the same dowel, or not the dowel rod, we're going to use that. the same PVC pipe that we're using to actually create the blade handle, and shove a chunk of dowel rod in there. Now, yeah, some people will say, hey, let's use one that actually slides in and out. Why the heck would I do that? I want it to stay there forever. So, instead, I'm going to get one that's the exact same size. Why? Because I got a heat gun. Some people don't. If you don't have a heat gun, you have a stove. If you don't have a stove, you have fire. Either one works for me. But shove this thing in there once it's properly heated. Once it cools down, though, you want to take your drill or screwdriver, depending, heat it up again, screw it in there, or make a hole. A proper hole would do better for you, sorry. And take a screw. In my case, I would use a flathead screw because I want to hide it underneath the paracord that we're going to use to cover this thing up. Heat it up again to make sure that once you're actually screwed this thing down, it's properly hidden and it actually is flush with the rest of the PVC. Now, he used a lot of dowel rod just to use this, and that way it actually stays properly seated. So what we're going to do is cut a little bit more than what we need off of this thing. Once you do that, it's, oh man, it's so fun to make this thing. But once you do that, you're going to do the exact same thing on the other side. Instead of screwing it in though, you're going to pull it out and try and keep it from seating. Alright, sanding this thing to make sure that it actually has a rounded edge. Even though we're going to cut off a lot more, you still want to do this. That way, when you heat up the other side, it sits properly. It's going to sit exactly how you want it to sit, and it's not going to bend to the direction of how the higher side of where you cut. Unless you cut it perfectly even. That's a whole different fight. Anyway, we're going to heat it up, and then seat it. And then we're going to keep turning it and twisting it. Once we pull it out, though, we're going to sand the thing down. That way it actually is a little bit smaller than it was before. And that way it can keep sliding in and out. But it's going to be able to lock from pressure. See? And that's how you connect two PVC pipes together. Alright, so we're going to actually try and seal the inside of this thing. Because it's a blade. You don't want to see the inside workings of a blade. I do personally, but that's just me. So, in this case, if you have the money, I would say get some liquid nail. Don't use spray foam for this. In this case, I wouldn't suggest it. It just doesn't work personally. It's personal preference. Alright. So, you're going to seal this thing off with some liquid nail. You're also going to be using some hot glue to seal off the liquid nail on the inside once the liquid nail dries. But before that, we're actually going to use that our good old friend glue gun, and seal off the sides that we used to cut and seat the thing in the first place. That way it's not going anywhere. Alright, after a priming coat of black, for this case we're actually getting to my favorite part, painting. Now, a word of warning, I am not a professional painter. I never will be, never was. So this is just me kind of amateur painting, making sure that it gets the way that I know how I want it to look. Now, the other thing I learned while I was trying to learn how to paint is always paint in one direction. You don't want any haphazard directions going all willy-nilly. If you paint up, you paint up. If you paint down, you paint down. Unless you really want that texture, that's a whole different fight. Me, I wanted a smooth blade edge. So I tried to get it as close as possible when I can. Alright. This technique actually requires a two-step process. The first step is actually going to be the primary coat. Once the primary coat is fairly dry, not fully dry, but fairly dry, you want to get a secondary coat on top of that. That way that glues the two together and actually makes it a more full color. Also, when you're doing this part, you want to actually take a sanding sponge, well, not a sanding sponge, a painting sponge. Painting sponge. Do not sand out the paint unless you have to, guys. You're going to take your painting sponge, take a little bit more paint, and just powder it. Powder all the way through this thing. You want that sheen. Sometimes there are some spray paints out there that give you a metallic sheen easy. I don't like using it, especially with acrylic paints. It doesn't come out as well as I would like it to. That's a personal preference. You guys don't have to hear that part. That painting is all about personal preference. unless you're trying to paint lead. Don't use lead-based paint. It just doesn't come out well. You're also going to want to, you know, seal this stuff. So I didn't show it in the video, but you want to like seal it. You don't have to put gloss. I use a plaid based, and that came out fairly well. So we're almost home, guys. So if you guys are happy with this, you're going to love the next part. The paracord technique that I'm using here is completely free balling because I've never had to use paracord before, upside till today. So what you're going to do, take your handy dandy glue gun, grab your paracord and wrap it around. You don't want to glob this stuff because you want to actually hide the glue underneath the paracord. So what you're going to do, let that top part dry and then keep going around. Like use little dots of heat glue. Well, I guess that's what it's called. Alright, and you're going to actually tighten it and constantly go down. And this part doesn't take as long as I would like it to, but you just go down and down and down, and you keep constant pressure, and you keep rubbing the primary part that you are actually going down. And in intervals, you want to actually put more glue. It's not going to hold from that first piece. So you just keep using more and more and more until you get down to the base. Once you get down to the base, you're going to cut it off, and with a little bit of fire, a little bit of heat, you're going to melt it into place. Alright, with that being said and done, guys, this was a fun prop. I highly suggest you get into it. You have to try and make this thing. I mean, show it to your friends, do whatever you want. But still, for this video, like, comment, subscribe. Thank you guys so much. And as always, keep on crafting.